Last episode we spoke about God and a lot of tangents that came with it.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason I was thinking, well, what's after God? Then it's parents, and then parents passing on their beliefs to their children.
Mm-hmm.
And also many triggers that I have are related to the relationship that I have with my parents.
Mm-hmm.
And much of the time, the things that happen between myself and my parents are the things that I would tell myself to be more aware of when one day I become a parent myself.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's just a mixture of those things. A lot of things that I just wanted to discuss parents in general, because being a parent, first of all, is a very unfair position. Because I always felt that no matter what a parent tries to do for their children,
mm-hmm.
it's never going to be enough for the kids.
Mm-hmm.
True, when they grow up, they'll be grateful for their parents, but they'll still have their complaints. So, for example, my mother grew up in an environment where her father was constantly away because he was an ambassador,
mm-hmm.
and for that she'll have complaints that her parents were usually not around as much as she would have liked. Now, my parents were around a lot for most of my life, and in my case, that felt suffocating. Mm-hmm. So the best example is for a person who has intellectual parents. Well, let's start with the other type. The type of kids who grew up with parents who are not very educated.
Mm-hmm.
Their main complaints are that their parents are not smart enough to show them or teach them things about the world that would have, in their thoughts, given them some advantages in life. So they always felt like they had to start from scratch. Well, I grew up with parents who were very intellectual, both PhDs, and my biggest complaint was that they never let me make my own mistakes. They always tried to give me the answers. Now, of course, I believe in the importance of guiding your kids in the right direction, but you can't control them to an extent where you get your expected results.
Mm-hmm.
The best you can do as a parent is give them the guidelines, don't impose upon them, try not to make it sound like you're trying to brainwash them, because then they'll resist it more. But that's usually what I received from my parents when they were trying to preach me on a certain thing.
Mm-hmm.
I always felt like they were trying to impose their beliefs on me and their fears and try to brainwash me into thinking the same way. But I also know that that's not exactly what they want, but somehow that's what they end up trying to do.
Okay, let's unpack some of that, because you said a lot of things right there. You said, first of all, that parents can never do enough for their kids. I thought that was interesting because you're basically saying it's unfair, that your parents had it unfair because there was never enough for you or your brother. But then you went on to talk about kind of how they were imposing their ways and their beliefs and whatnot on you. So go back to how is it unfair for them?
Yeah, so like I just said, the grass is always greener on the other side. So I grew up with parents who were very intellectual, who had a lot of things to say, and one of the things that I, to this day, that really pushes my buttons is hearing the words, "We need to talk," or "Come sit, come sit,"
Mm-hmm.
because then I know it usually ends up in a 3 to 4 hour monologue from my parents.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always on the receiving end of it, and they go off on these tangents because after a while they start enjoying the talk itself.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is the way the conversation started was like an intervention. So I'm sitting at an intervention for hours on end,
Mm-hmm.
while they think they're just having a light conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, they are also aware of the fact that they started the conversation because they wanted to intervene somehow
Mm-hmm.
in my life, my lifestyle, or the choices that I've made or about to make. And they will end it on, okay, so going back to the point, I think you should do this, do that, or I think you should try this or try that, or not to do this, not to do that. So they were not very joyful for me. But anyway, getting back to the point of being in an unfair position is, now all the things that I know my parents did everything they could in their power to provide for me and my brother, not only materially,
Mm-hmm.
but also mentally. And they love me with all their hearts. I know that. I have no doubts about that. But still, my brother and I have complaints about them because you can't be perfect as a parent. You're a human being. So I have a list of things on my mind that I'm staying aware of, so that when I have my own children, I can be more aware and not make the same mistakes. But at the same time, I also know no matter how much I try to perfect my parenting by reflecting off of my parents' parenting, my children are going to have their complaints of my own. So I guess it's safe to say that children in general are just ungrateful bitches, including myself. What would you say?
Well, look. So I have the perspective both as obviously having parents and then now being a parent. Okay, let me just start with a basic definition. All right. So everything is shaped in my worldview as a Christian, and everything actually makes so much sense. It just makes sense, and it's validated when I hear it's validated by the fact that when I hear experiences, which we all have, of people falling short of that biblical standard, it just makes it all the more true. It just supports the idea that it's true. Here's what I mean by that. Okay, so parenting, first of all, what is it? Like, why did God design this whole idea of parenting? I think that it's actually the second greatest gift He gave us. Second to salvation, which is eternal fellowship with God and with other believers. Being a parent is the closest that we become to experiencing what is said to be God, because we play a part in bringing forth life, which is just an incredible thought. Now, obviously, you're not a parent yet, and I like that you speak with when, not if, although I got to say, there's a couple steps before the parenthood, hopefully, right? Yeah. Namely marriage, dating, but when
pregnancy, that's a huge barrier nowadays, apparently.
Yeah. So it's the second greatest gift, okay, to be a parent, because almost every parent, especially the Christian ones, will tell you their understanding of God's love is much deeper and greater because they know how much they love their kids.
Yeah.
Almost every parent, well-meaning parent, almost every parent is well-meaning and is willing to do anything for their kids, despite being at times the ungrateful bees that you mentioned. Now, see, here's where the wisdom of the Bible comes in. The Bible talks about being fruitful. So for one thing, if you can, have lots of kids. And what does that do? Well, it does a lot of things. I mean, first of all, it's what God said to do, right? It multiplies your joy. But also, the more kids you have, they learn to basically realize they're not the center of the universe, that they're one among many. They got to learn how to share, learn how to take turns. They got to, for the older ones, learn how to take care of the younger ones, and all these things. Now, I wish I had more kids. We started late. That leads me to my next topic, which is this. The Bible mentions that we are, we're born into a family of origin, but then when we get married, that's a very clear, beginning of a new phase in your life. When you get married, in fact, it says, every man, I don't know the exact reference, but we are basically to leave our family of origin and become one flesh with our wife.
The new family.
Yes, and have a new family. Now, until then, your priority, we talked about this a lot. Until you're married, I believe that your priority is your family of origin, that you do have, some sort of obligation, right, to honor your parents and all these things. Now, which honoring your parents never goes away, but the fact that you're living together, in a way, I guess what I'm saying is you're still kind of under their domain to some extent. Now, here's the problem. I believe that in the biblical, view, and the way I see it, not just in theory but in practice, among some the Christians that I admire, they marry young. And I told you before about Paul Washer, don't date long, because why? You're gonna have hormones, right? You're gonna have urges. You're gonna have sexual desire for the opposite sex, and that's like a fire that needs to be harnessed and contained and used appropriately, otherwise it's very dangerous and destructive. We see that all around society, right? So ideally, parents raise their kids to maturity at a relatively young age. For us, it's going to seem crazy to say, well, when you're 18 or 19 or 20, you're ready for marriage. That's unheard of nowadays. But it didn't always. It wasn't always that way. In fact, I think marriage even occurred when like kids were like 13, 14, basically just getting into adolescence. But that to me is the right model. Why? Because then again, when you start when you start that new phase of your life, which is marriage and hopefully having children, you're no longer under this domain, so to speak, of your parents. I think that Koreans, culturally, for whatever reason, I think it's wise. I think it's basically the right thing for people to live with parents and have family time until they're married. The problem is they're not getting married, or they're getting married super late. Right. Like by the time you're 40 or pushing 40, like it's time. You know what I mean? If it's going to happen. So, that's not to say there are some exceptions. I mean, for some people, marriage is not the answer, or maybe they're not even meant to get married. That's a different case. So I'm not saying speak for everybody, but by and large, for most people. I think in our society today, one of the problems is that, we want this independence from our parents, but yet we don't want the commitment of marriage. And so we're in this limbo. And then in that limbo, honestly, a lot of bad things happen. Sexual promiscuity, instability, dissatisfaction. I mean, these are the common plagues of our society today. Yes, I know that's a mouthful, but let me stop with that.
So going back to parents, what were some issues that you wanted to discuss? Okay, so we just started off the bat just dove right into conversation. But let's just backtrack a little and start with, in your mind, what do you think is the appropriate definition of being a parent? Or the most important roles of being parents?
Well, I know that my role as a Christian parent is to teach my children the ways of the Lord. That comes in many ways. That comes in many different forms. It comes in the example that I set through my marriage to my wife. That's the hardest thing to remember, is that the best thing I can do for my kids is not even spending time with them, but it's showing them how much I value and cherish my wife. Because I believe that's because, for better or for worse, they're going to mimic what I do. How I treat my wife, how I treat them, is exactly how they're going to treat their spouse and their kids. Not exactly, but there is a high correlation. And this is, I don't know if there's actually been studies about it, but it's just common sense. I mean, I see it.
Yeah, it's frequently proven.
And, I see it in my life. I see it in pretty much everyone else I've talked to, whose parents' lives. So that's the first thing. Now, earlier you talked about your parents kind of saying we got to talk and how much you hate that. And what I wanted to ask you was, when they say, well, I think you should do A, B, and C, are you inclined to reject it just because you're being told what to do? Or are you actually trying to independently look at the merits of what they're saying?
I'm doing both, actually. Because first of all, the thing I noticed about the intellectual people, in my personal experience, from people who are either highly educated, meaning they got multiple degrees, and also people who started living alone from a young age. For instance, when you go off to college in a different city in Korea, it's not that common as opposed to in a much larger country where college obviously is going to be far away. Or of course, many children choose to go there to be away from their parents. But what I notice is that they tend to be very stubborn, to say the least. And I guess in a good way, it means that they are more in control of their thoughts. But what I mean by that is they tend to be bad listeners. Because I don't know if it's something separable, but I think it's one thing that entails being highly educated. You have to have a certain conviction about your beliefs or your knowledge. And that's sort of the energy that pushes you forward to achieving even more. But at the same time, when it comes to relationships, sometimes it can be a hindrance because if you're so sure that what you think or what you believe is right, there's a very high risk that you will not listen to anything that someone else is saying. So if this happens between friends, that could be that. But if it happens between a parent and child relationship, then oftentimes a child will go through life thinking that he or she is never heard. Because sometimes all people want is just to be heard, not to be actually helped, not to have certain burdens taken off their back, not to receive any specific answers or solutions, but just to be heard and empathized. I'm going through this sort of situation in my life, and I just want my family and my parents to root for me rather than trying to take that sort of condescending or teacher-esque attitude and say, yeah, I've been there. I know exactly what you're going through. So usually how that goes on in my household is I try to say one thing. Let's say I manage to say 10 words, and from then it's going to be about at least a half hour of their monologues. And the thing that irks me oftentimes is that my parents will assume that they know something about me, and everything else that entails my personality or my action or my choices or my thoughts, they will assume it is all tied into that thing that they know about me. The thing is, people are very complex. Not everything is correlated with each other. Many of them are, I agree, but not everything. But it just, it really discourages you and turns you away from the conversation if you get fed so much false information about yourself when you yourself know that's not true. Now, of course, I do know that people from time to time deserve criticism because sometimes you may not be aware of certain habits or there's room to grow, of course, I know. But certain times when I know what I'm feeling and they're trying to tell me what I'm feeling or the reason why I'm feeling that way without really giving me a chance to explain it myself, that just really gives you the feeling that, oh, this is a dead-end conversation. And I've made some attempts to try, but like I said, every time I attempt to mutter 10 words, they'll chime in with 500 more. So yeah, it's really discouraging. And once the conversation goes on for like 3 to 4 hours, then you don't really remember anything that's really said anymore, which is why I think it's really important to keep messages simple and concise and to the point and as light as possible. Because if you make it heavy, like we need to talk, sit down, and you set a heavy mood, then that puts a lot of pressure on the recipient. So you need to be concise and simple. And I really never really had that.
Let's practice where we preach. We'll talk from one minute at a time.
Yeah.
Okay?
Table topics.
Parents, give guidance, but don't try to control your kids. I'm speaking to myself. And again, this is exactly what God has done for us. He gave us the commandments. He gave us the Bible. He gave us the example of Jesus. He gives us the offer of salvation through faith. But he doesn't force it. He doesn't control you. Okay? Now, predestination, different topic. He doesn't control you. We all can agree, you make your own decisions. And that's how we ought to operate. Now, when you're young, there is a need for discipline. There's a need because you're not mature enough to make your own decisions on certain things. So that's the fine line. That's where the balance and judgment comes in. Because as you mature, you should be able to get more and more independence. But in the very beginning, no. Okay? So there's a place for control, so to speak. But it's got to decrease as the child matures. All right, so my minute's up. You talked about empathy. And there's a book I'm reading called Adult Children of Abusive Parents. And it goes through anecdote after anecdote. And it mentions that emotional abuse is kind of at the heart of all kinds of all abuse, whether it's physical or sexual, neglect, all these things. So I just wanted to put that in there because what you were saying about empathy was ringing true to what this, this clinical, I think he's a psychologist, whatever, wrote in the book. Now, how can I lead that into a question? How about this? What's an example? I'm very curious about this. What's an example of what you mentioned before, where your parents thought they knew something about you, and they thought they had a theory about why you did something or whatever, but yet they were wrong because they assumed something that wasn't true, given that you, as you say, are complex? 1 minute. To 2.
Well, there are many examples of that, and some of them are major, some of them are minor.
Okay.
And even benign, but we can all agree that usually in life it's the small things that can make all the difference. Like I said, you just want to be heard sometimes. And okay, for instance, like when I was younger, we would have like this talk, and I would start crying because emotion would get the better of me.
That's hard to imagine, by the way, because I've never seen Jake get emotional.
Well, I get very emotional a lot. you should see me watching movies. Anyway, and then like my mother usually in those situations tries to really act tougher, right? And I think it's a way of her attempting to conceal the fact that she doesn't really see herself as tough and strong. You can usually tell that when a person gets really defensive or tries to act overly tough. And she'll say something like, well, why are you crying? And I tell her the reason, and she'll like, no, don't, that's not the reason. You're crying because of this and this. And usually the reason that she provides instead of what I say is something that's a little more belittling than a child would want to hear. So even though you may have these other more deeper reasons for your tears, but then your mother just sort of like trivializes and said, nah, don't bullshit me. You're crying because of this, you know? Stop trying to concealing it. Stop trying to conceal it with your made-up noble reasons. And those are things that may not ultimately matter in the big picture of life, but it's just that psychoanalysis has proven that when it comes to your mental health, one major event, such as parents getting a divorce or father getting really drunk and beating his family, and compared to like smaller events like your parents accusing you of lying even though you're telling the truth, if say those minor events happen 10 times, they can add up to the intensity of one major event of a divorce or drunken father beating.
Okay.
So you can't really ignore those small things, and yet those things happen a lot because nobody really pays attention to all that, you know? It's a parent's duty to sometimes make sure that their child is not lying. So yeah, those kind of things.
All right. Well, let me transition, because I was thinking of a positive thing. Yeah. Tim Ferriss gave the advice, as others I'm sure, but I heard from him, interview your parents. He does this, by the way. He's also the one that
interviews his own parents.
Yes, or at least interviewed once. Okay, and the rationale, which I like a lot, is when you humanize your parents and see their background and learn about their parents, you can be much more empathetic toward how they parented you, especially things that you don't like about them. So we're joined here by our first guest, unofficially, to our podcast. This is Jana Huang. Jana, would you tell our audience, first, let's say this. Today we're talking about mommies and daddies, okay? So tell the audience a little bit about your mommy. What do you think about mommy?
You get angry.
Say it to them.
Yeah, say it to the camera.
Over there. Look right into the little white circle.
Bashful.
What'd you say? Okay, what she said for the audience was she gets angry easily. Okay, what else do you want to say? She hasn't learned the 2 positives before 1 negative rule. She keeps straight up with the negative. You don't have much to say about mommy? Okay, how about this? How about daddy?
Or it could be that.
One more.
Okay, one more, yes. How about one good thing about mommy?
Yeah.
Good thing.
Yeah. You don't have any good thing to say about mommy?
I have a bad thing.
Okay, what's another bad thing?
The bad thing is, mommy, she says she's gonna do it, and then she forget it and she don't do it.
Okay, yeah, that is true.
Which is true for most of us.
Okay,
all of us.
Yeah, so how about anything else? Do you have anything nice to say about mommy?
The nice thing. No, I have one more thing.
Okay, one more thing. Go ahead.
she bad to me, but then my friend come over, she do good.
Oh, like what? What do you mean she does good to your friends but bad to you? What do you mean?
She talks good.
Oh, she talks good to them?
Mm-hmm.
She treats them nicely?
Mm-hmm.
But she treats you badly?
A little bit.
Little bit?
More different than that.
More different than that. Okay, well that's understandable.
That's the same with my parents.
You know,
too.
that's our job, right?
Right.
Sometimes we have to talk bad to you if you're acting bad because other kids, we're not their mommy and daddy, right? But what's one good thing about mommy? I know one good thing. It's not a really good thing, but it's true. Remember when mommy was gone?
Mm-hmm.
What did you say over and over when mommy was gone?
I miss her.
Yeah, that's so sweet. But what's one good thing about mommy?
Good thing.
Yeah.
Anything.
Oh yeah, I have one more bad thing.
Okay, tell them. Tell them.
That is,
Tell them.
the bad thing is,
Okay.
mommy says she open a place where she like do baking, like make cookie and then like just sell it and they get money, but she not doing it.
Oh.
So unfulfilled potential, right? You're saying
Ooh.
mommy has entrepreneurial skills, but she's not cashing in on that ability. Okay, wow, that's pretty
insightful.
it's pretty nuanced there. All right, so we have 4 negatives, which in theory means we should find about 12 positives, so the mommy doesn't like jump off a bridge tonight. Okay? Do you have anything you want to say that's good about mommy?
See what I mean by ungrateful bees?
I have one more bad thing.
See?
Okay.
The bad thing is, Mom married late.
Mommy got married late. Why is that bad?
Why is that a bad thing?
I mean, I did say that's kind of a bad thing, but
Yeah.
why do you think it's bad?
That
Because
because
Daddy said so.
I don't want Mom to die so fast.
Oh. Okay, so that's kind of sweet. You don't want Mama to die so fast, right?
That because I have to learn how to make food by myself so I don't die.
Oh, okay. That's a very practical, pragmatic reason.
Okay, but Jana, now I really think Mama is going to be crying because you didn't say one good thing. You said 5 bad things about Mommy. What's one good thing about Mommy? Seriously.
One good thing is she's good at Korean.
She's good at Korean.
That's it?
Mm-hmm.
If you're worried about your mom dying fast because she got married young, you can help her live longer by being nice to her.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're nice to someone, that actually increases their longevity, how long they live.
Okay, well, Jana, your time's been very valuable today, but let's talk real quick about Daddy. Do you have anything good or bad to say about Daddy?
Yeah.
Nothing but bad about Daddy?
I'm thinking about it.
You're thinking about it. Go ahead and think about it.
Bad thing is,
Yeah.
no. I didn't talk
Start from the
about
bad things?
it.
Yeah, I'm also the type of person who wants the bad news first so that we end on a good note.
If there's a good note.
Okay, the good thing is
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
you teach me a workbook.
Teach your workbook. Okay.
And then the bad thing is
Uh-huh.
you're not that good at making food like Mommy.
That's true.
Okay.
But you do like the rice. Bap and gimen, original.
And salad.
And salad.
No, but you
And
could've-
jam.
Yeah, you didn't made it.
What about my eggs and bacon?
Eggs and bacon?
Yeah.
You didn't made it for a long time.
Yeah, I know, but when I do make it, how is it? You know what? I'm not going to be defensive. All right, I'm not good at cooking. What else?
And
A lot to think about parenting right here. I think it's also attributed to the fact that she just came out of a room where her older brother was being disciplined.
Oh, she was completely unaffected by that, trust me.
why Jamin not
That scene, if you looked at it,
Why
she was
Jamin not
blissfully
coming now?
ignorant of what's going on. She's right there with the screen. Okay, actually, yeah, let's let Javen come out.
Just stay right
Can you
there.
go bring Javen? Thank you.
Javen's probably in a vulnerable state now.
So, for those who don't know, Jana is 6 years old, U.S.
International
age,
age.
yeah, 6.5. And she'll be starting She'll be starting kindergarten with. So this is Javen, our firstborn. All right. So
It was just fretting a while ago, right?
tell the audience a little bit about yourself before we interview you.
I love to play games,
Mm-hmm.
and I have a habit in them. When I get up, I do workbooks first before I do other stuff.
Yeah, that's a recent habit, but yeah, good habit.
And that's it.
Yeah, what are you obsessed with these days? What are you always like watching and playing these days?
I'm playing.
Fortnite.
No, she's been off that. We took him off that. Actually.
I'm playing an airplane game.
Okay, yeah, like real airplane
Flight
simulations.
simulator, yeah.
So, I'm sure we're running out of memory here, and maybe you're getting a little bored. Sorry, partner. But today we're talking about mommies and daddies, parents. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, Jamin, I want to get your perspective as a young child. You know, obviously you have mommy and daddy. Tell us a little bit about your parents. What do you think about them?
I think we do have a good family
Why?
because we do family worship is the first thing where they think it's important,
Yeah.
and not that many families they really want to know about God because they're kind of saying like, why is he not doing this? Why is he not doing that? So.
Sometimes we don't want to do family worship too, right?
Yeah, sometimes it's hard because it's 4 of us. Sometimes, like, Daddy and I want to do it, but Jaina and Mommy doesn't want to do it sometimes.
Yeah, let's not throw them under the bus. Sometimes we don't want to do it too, right? But we try to do it.
We try to do
Okay.
it.
So yeah, so family worship is one good thing. What else? Let me try to guide this conversation.
And I just like our family, just. Because I'm just thankful to have a family.
That's very grown up.
So, Javen, you believe that God gave you mommy and daddy, right?
Yes.
We talk about that all the time. So, are mommy and daddy perfect? Yes or no?
No,
Okay, why not?
because we all have sin.
Yeah, we're all sinners. So, why does God give you mommy and daddy?
To like teach us and raise us and to like help us.
So, to teach you, right? Even if it's something you don't want to hear, right? So, earlier, a few minutes ago, I heard there was a problem in the room.
Did that came out?
Well,
Maybe.
no.
Maybe. It might
I
have
hear
gotten
it.
caught by the mic.
Maybe not from the camera, but I could hear something, a problem. But Javen, it's okay because that's real life, right? I'm actually happy when that happened because we don't want to seem like everything is all easy and
Pretentious,
perfect. Yeah.
yeah.
So tell us what happened, and what did you learn?
Every day I learn the same thing.
But what happened right now with mom?
Well, I got upset because I couldn't not find the show, the movie,
Okay.
and then I was getting a little bit of cranky, so I shout.
Okay. So was it right to shout at mama like that?
No,
Did mama do something wrong?
no.
No? Are you sure? I wasn't there, so if you think something was wrong, you just say it.
Maybe.
Like, what did mama do wrong?
I think
You don't know yet?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah,
But,
sometimes I think
so,
about it.
yeah, so it's okay. But, Javen, one thing I want to remind you, this is true for me too. God says in the 10 Commandments to honor your mother and father, right? That means you treat them with respect, okay?
Yeah.
And that's very important. And that's something that I have to do with my mommy too, right? You see daddy get mad at
You
grandma.
always get upset.
I know. And I know that's wrong. So I have to apologize to grandma. What? Okay? So Javen, if you did something wrong, which is yelling at mom and giving attitude, then you should apologize. And if mommy did something wrong, then she will apologize too. Let me ask you about your mommy and daddy. Do we ever apologize to you? Yes or no?
Yes.
Do we make mistakes? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah, all the time. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right, is there anything else you want to say about mommy and daddy?
No.
Okay, thank you for joining us today. All right?
I'll wait.
And maybe you'll come back again when you're feeling better, because I know you have lots of things you can talk about.
I know.
All right, see you later, Javen. Say bye to the audience.
Bye-bye.
Okay. All right.
One of the traits of good parenting is being more than passive, but actively seeking to improve yourself and being open to criticism even from your own children. Because admitting that you're wrong and that you make mistakes, even immediately after you have said something or done something, and even if the beginning was because your child doing something wrong, doesn't make you any weaker. Actually, it makes you seem stronger that you own up to your mistakes immediately. But trying to cover them up with more made-up excuses or reasons that even your child can see through. Pretending to be the perfect parent, even though you know yourself you're not, can actually backfire and you lose integrity. So what we just witnessed now is a good example of at least one of the many traits of good parenting. So the openness,
Oh, thank you.
the actively seeking feedback,
Yeah.
encouraging honesty
Right.
rather than political correctness, and also acknowledging the fact that apologies and faults can go both ways.
I'll say this, one of the pitfalls of that whole approach, as much as I agree with everything you said, is that the kids can start thinking that they're on equal level as you, that they're your friends. And I think that's a tendency for many parents is to try to become friends and gain the approval of their kids, right? By pleasing them.
And losing their position as disciplinarians.
Correct, as an authority. And so it has to be made clear.
Right.
I was just reading on this book. It was actually a secular-based book, but the principle is true. Like, you need to give your kids a sense of dignity and choice and autonomy. But at the same time, they have to know that they're not on the same plane. Like, they are under your authority.
Right.
And that's not to mean that you're a better person. It's just a role that we have.
Yeah.
It does mean that because we're older, we should be wiser, right? And that's just the role that God put us in, whether we like it or not. And sometimes the easier thing to do is actually to be kind of buddy-buddy and to not want to upset your kids and not speak the truth, right? That's actually the easier thing to do,
Right.
Especially when they get older, you know. But I got to remember, like, no, they need to know boundaries, they need to know authority, because that's something that ultimately is going to help them.
One thing I personally believe is before undertaking a major position as a parent, it's probably best that you practice on a pet first.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. We were talking about getting kids. Do you guys want to get a dog? Who wants to have a dog? Raise your hand.
Me.
Okay, so we'll see soon enough. Okay, I know your memory's running out, and we've been going a while, so we can wrap this up.
Sure.
Thanks for.
And so last week we spoke about God.
Yeah.
This week is parents. So next week it's going to be about partnership, dating, and love.
Always a fun subject.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. See you next time.